Good afternoon. I'm perhaps the only non-expert in the panel today. What I have been requested, and I'll try and focus, is on the perspective of my own country that I represent, Bangladesh. And I have divided the deliberation in 4 sections. First, I would try and focus on the seed and the root of terrorism in Bangladesh. Then I would go to the incubation and the rise of violent extremism and terrorism. Then I'll come to the current challenges, and finally the way forward. Now, the seed, in my opinion, is a communalism, the faith-centric communalism, an extremely divisive thought, having a very strong potential to incite violence. And if we look at the history, particularly in a society where the literacy rate is pretty low and poverty is acute, this so-called ideology, or venomous ideology rather, communalism, gets its root pretty quickly. If we look at the history of the division of the subcontinent, it was divided on the two-nation theory, which in my opinion was very divisive and very communal. And that was the initial or the very first philosophical and psychological seed of terrorism in our part of the world, which is the Indian subcontinent. From the seed, if we try and look at the root, what was the root in Bangladesh? I'll go back to what happened on 15th August 1975, when the founding father, the father of the nation, and the sitting president of the country, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and most of the members of his family were assassinated by the terrorists. And the values and morals on which we fought our war of liberation in 1971 and the country became independent, those took a 180-degree turn. The military dictatorship practically took the country back to the pre-independence era. The values on which we fought our historic war of liberation were primarily democracy and secularism. But after the carnage of 15th August 75, the venom of faith or religion were introduced and injected into the constitution of the country by the military dictatorship, and that continued for years. From the root, we saw a plant, and that plant was an organization named Jamaat-e-Islami. That organization not only opposed the independence of Bangladesh, but also its leaders and workers committed crimes against humanity, collaborating with the Pakistan military during our war of liberation in 1971. Its leaders, even after 3.5 years of independence, were campaigning against Bangladesh in different countries around the globe. When Bangladesh was a member of the United Nations and Bangladesh was a member of all major international organizations, and Bangladesh was recognized by the overwhelming majority of the countries in the world. They were campaigning against an independent country. And after the 15th August carnage, these people were allowed to come back to Bangladesh, and they were rehabilitated, and they were allowed to do politics, and they were allowed to operate in the public space. And they started growing with the direct patronage by the military dictatorship for years. They have been able to attain a level where they had the financial strength and garner a support of maximum 3 to 4%. But one thing we must remember, their cadres of Jamaat were armed, and they were trained to commit acts of violence and terror. It may be relevant to just cite an example. It is not what I'm saying. The student front of Jamaat, which is called the Islami Chhatra Shibir, it was the third most active non-state armed group in the world in 2013. And this is according to the Jane's Global Terrorism and Insurgency Attack Index 2013. It's not what I'm saying. We can all go to this particular reference and find what Jamaat Student Front is and has been described by James. Whenever it was felt necessary by the Jamaat leadership, they created the offshoots. They quote-unquote expelled some of their leaders and workers to go underground, create the offshoots, and operate from there. Some of those people were also returnees from the war in Afghanistan. All the terrorist organizations in Bangladesh, those are banned. Their so-called leaders were either members of Jamaat or its student front. Now, we all know what's happening around the world, and we are no exception. We all know what is happening or what has been happening in Bangladesh, and particularly the attention of the world was drawn on the deadly terrorist attack in a restaurant cum cafe in Gulshan in Dhaka, the capital city, on 1st of July this year. The challenges, in my opinion, are mainly to de-radicalize the youth who have already been radicalized, regardless of their background. They are not only from the poor families. The latest incidents reveal that some of them are from very wealthy background. They went to good schools, good colleges, good universities, even studied abroad. The challenge is to fight it out on two fronts. One is definitely on the ground, the law and order front. And the other one, which is perhaps more challenging, is the ideological battle. And it has to be all-encompassing. It cannot be fought in isolation by one particular segment of the society. And given the realities, the religious clerics in Bangladesh must play a very, very important role in that effort. Some of the initiatives have been taken by the government. I don't have the time to elaborate all. Just to give you one example, a very unified Friday prayer sermon, what we always know and see, has been circulated by the public institution, which is Islamic Foundation, to imams of all the mosques in the country for delivery on Friday. In June this year, a socio-religious decree, I call the fatwas socio-religious decrees, was issued by one of the very enlightened and moderate religious clerics, Mr. Fariduddin Masood. It was supported by 100,000 clerics all over the country. But issuing these socio-religious decrees is not easy. There are challenges. I'll just share with you what has happened after he has issued the fatwa. It was in June, and on 7th of July, during the Eid congregation, largest Eid congregation in Bangladesh, in a place called Sholakia, which is 70, 80 kilometers, 50 miles from the capital city, while Mr. Masood was supposed to lead the prayer. He has been doing it for several years. The moment his chopper arrived in a nearby helipad in a school compound, the terrorist tried to barge in. There was a tussle and a fight with the security personnel. One terrorist was killed immediately on the spot. A security official was also killed. Another terrorist was captured. The 300,000 people who gathered there to say their prayers were not the targets. The target was this particular cleric. That's my opinion. And the message was very clear, because what he issued in June, the first one was that killing human beings in the name of faith or religion is totally forbidden in Islam. And all his diktats were based on the Holy Book, quoting the holy verses and referring to the Holy Book and explaining those. And these go directly against what the terrorist organizations, whether it is JMB or Jamaat or Ansar al-Islam, or for that matter Al-Qaeda or ISIS, you just name it, each and every terrorist organization is trying to propagate. And the other message was, in my opinion, more threatening, that if anybody tries to do or makes an attempt to do similar things, you would be on our list. The way forward is to nurture the values on which Bangladesh was founded, primarily democracy and secularism. How do we do that? That's the challenge. We, the people today in Bangladesh, are determined to eradicate this terrorist organization, Jamaat, socially and legally. We are determined to boycott this terrorist organization and all its affiliates for any goods or services, or for that matter human relationships. And eradicating this devil, the terrorist organization which propagates violence, is the way forward to counter terrorism and violent extremism in Bangladesh, which is the People's Republic of Bangladesh. That means people are the source of all power and nothing else, nothing otherwise. Those values must be nurtured in the families, in the schools, colleges, universities, everywhere in the society. And what I see is a strong determination today among the people who have seen all these acts of terror and violence and intimidation for years, regardless of the small percentage of support they garner, and they are determined to go for this social movement. And that is the social way of eradicating this menace, a devil, a terrorist organization. And of course, there are legal ways as well. We believe that we need to go and follow both the paths parallelly, and that would be the way forward. I will conclude here, and I'll be happy to take any questions or receive your comments and interact. Thank you.